Rain hammered the dusty streets of Kennewick, Washington Territory, turning them into rivers of mud as Kade Quinlan rode into town on a gray October afternoon in 1882. Soaked to the bone and searching for nothing more than a hot meal and a dry bed. But what he found instead was a woman in a wedding dress standing alone outside the church, tears mixing with rainwater on her pale cheeks. He pulled his horse to a stop, water streaming from the brim of his hat. The woman didn't move, didn't acknowledge his presence. She just stood there in that white dress, now transparent and clinging to her frame, staring at nothing. Something about the emptiness in her eyes made him dismount despite every practical instinct telling him to keep riding. "Madam." His boots splashed in the puddles as he approached. "You need help." She turned slowly, as if waking from a dream. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her shoulders, and her lips had a blue tinge from the cold. When she spoke, her voice was hollow. "I stopped believing in tomorrow." The words hit him harder than they should have, perhaps because he had felt that way himself not so long ago. "That's a dangerous thing to stop believing in," he said carefully, "especially standing out here in weather like this." "Why?" she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What difference does tomorrow make when today has already destroyed everything?" Kade glanced at the church behind her, then back at her sodden wedding dress. The story wrote itself, but he needed to hear it from her. "You want to tell me what happened?" He didn't come. 3 simple words, but they carried the weight of a shattered world. "I waited. Everyone waited." And he just didn't come. A small crowd had gathered under the church eaves, watching them. Kade recognized the look on their faces, pity mixed with relief that it wasn't them standing there in the rain, drowning in humiliation. He had never been fond of crowds or their judgment. "Come on," he said, shrugging out of his wet coat and draping it over her shoulders. It didn't help much since they were both already soaked, but it was the gesture that mattered. "Let's get you out of this rain before you catch your death." She didn't resist when he took her elbow and guided her down the street. The whispers followed them, but Kade had long ago stopped caring what strangers thought. They passed the saloon, the general store, and the hotel before he finally led her into the small restaurant at the end of the main street. It was nearly empty at this hour, just an old man nursing coffee in the corner and a tired-looking waitress wiping down tables. "2 coffees," Kade told the waitress. "Hot as you can make them, and whatever food you have ready." He guided the woman to a table near the potbelly stove and pulled out a chair for her. She sat mechanically, still wrapped in that strange emptiness. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably around 23 or 24. Pretty, though her face was blotchy from crying and her eyes were red-rimmed. The waitress brought the coffee and Kade wrapped the woman's cold fingers around the cup. "Drink," he ordered gently. She obeyed, taking small sips. Color slowly returned to her lips. They sat in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the drumming of rain on the roof and the crackle of the stove. Finally, she spoke. "My name is Willa Lawrence." Her voice was steadier now. "And you are Kade Quinlan." He wrapped his own hands around his coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into his chilled fingers. "I'm just passing through. Lucky you." There was that bitter edge again. "I wish I were just passing through. Instead, I am the entertainment of the day." The jilted bride, the fool who believed in promises. The waitress brought plates of stew and thick slices of bread. Kade pushed one toward Willa. "You should eat." "I should do a lot of things." But she picked up the spoon anyway, taking a bite more from habit than hunger. After a moment, she continued. "His name was Thomas Brennan. We had been engaged for 6 months. Everything was planned. My dress, the flowers, the dinner afterward. My father paid for all of it." "Where is your father now?" "Gone." "He left the church as soon as it became clear Thomas was not coming. He was angry. Humiliated. I think he was more upset about the wasted money and the embarrassment than about my broken heart. She laughed again, that same hollow sound. Isn't that terrible? But I understand it. This town is small. Everyone knows everyone. By morning, there will not be a single person in Kennewick who has not heard about how Willa Lawrence was left standing at the altar. Kade ate his stew, considering his words carefully. He had always been better with horses than people, more comfortable on the open range than in conversation. But something about this woman pulled at him. Maybe it was the rawness of her pain, so fresh and unguarded. Or maybe it was that look in her eyes when she said she stopped believing in tomorrow. He knew that look. He had seen it in his own reflection after his brother died. Tomorrow comes whether we believe in it or not, he finally said. Trust me, I know. I spent a year trying to drink away my tomorrows after I lost someone. Did not work. The sun kept rising and I kept waking up with a headache and the same hollow feeling in my chest. Willa looked at him with real curiosity for the first time. Who did you lose? My younger brother, James. He was 19, full of dreams and plans. We were driving cattle up from Texas to Montana. There was a stampede. He got thrown from his horse, trampled before anyone could reach him. The words still hurt, even 2 years later. I was supposed to watch out for him. Promised my mother I would keep him safe. I am sorry. And she meant it. He could hear it in her voice. Point is, Kade continued, grief and disappointment do not give us permission to stop living. James would have kicked my behind if he saw me wallowing. And whoever this Thomas is, he is not worth you standing in the rain, drowning in despair. Easy for you to say. You did not just get abandoned in front of the entire town. No, I just watched my brother die in front of an entire cattle crew and couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Different circumstances, same feeling of helplessness. He met her eyes across the table. The question is not what happened, it is what you do next. Willa set down her spoon. I do not know what to do next. I cannot go home, not yet. My father will have things to say and I cannot face them right now. I have no money of my own. Thomas was supposed to provide for us. I was supposed to move into his house. We were supposed to start our life together. Her voice cracked on the last word. What about friends? Family besides your father. My mother died when I was 12. I have an aunt in Portland, but we are not close. My friends. She trailed off, staring into her coffee. I thought I had friends, but when I saw their faces today, all I saw was judgment and pity. I do not want either. Kade finished his stew, thinking. He had come to Kennewick looking for work at one of the horse ranches outside town. He had heard they needed experienced hands, and after months of drifting, he was ready to settle somewhere for the winter. The last thing he needed was to get tangled up in a stranger's troubles. But looking at Willa's face, still pale and drawn, still carrying that defeated look, he found he could not just walk away. The hotel across the street, he said. They have rooms. I will pay for one for you tonight. Give you somewhere dry to sleep, time to figure out your next move. She shook her head immediately. I cannot accept that. I do not know you and I cannot take your money. You are not taking it, I am offering it. There is a difference. He stood up, pulling out a few coins for the meal. Come on. You need rest, and I need to get out of these wet clothes before I catch pneumonia. Willa hesitated, then slowly rose. The restaurant had gotten busier while they talked, and several heads turned to watch them leave. Kade felt her stiffen beside him, felt her awareness of the stares and whispers. He placed a hand on her lower back, guiding her out into the rain, which had lessened to a steady drizzle. The hotel lobby was warm and dry. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger and his eyes widened at the sight of Willa's wedding dress. Kade cut off whatever comment he was about to make. 2 rooms, 1 night. Yes, sir. The clerk turned the register around and Kade signed both their names, paying in advance. The clerk handed over 2 keys. Rooms 8 and 9, second floor. They climbed the narrow stairs in silence. At the landing, Kade handed Willa one of the keys. "Lock your door, get some sleep. Things will look different in the morning." "Will they?" She held the key loosely as if it might disappear. "Or will I just wake up to the same nightmare? Guess you will have to wait until tomorrow to find out." He gave her a small smile. "And you might have stopped believing in it, but I have not." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not quite hope, but maybe the shadow of it. Then she nodded and disappeared into her room. Kade heard the lock click behind her and felt a strange sense of relief. His own room was small but clean. He stripped off his wet clothes and hung them over the chair to dry, then lay on the bed in his underclothes, staring at the water-stained ceiling. He had done his good deed. Come morning, he would head to the Triple Bar Ranch and inquire about work. Willa Lawrence was not his responsibility. She would figure out her own path, and he would ride out of her life as quickly as he had ridden in. But sleep was slow to come, and when it did, his dreams were filled with brown eyes and white dresses and rain. Morning dawned clear and cold. Kade woke early, dressed in his now dry clothes, and headed downstairs. The clerk was different from last night, this one a young man who barely looked up from his newspaper as Kade passed. He stepped out onto the boardwalk, breathing in the crisp air. The street was mostly empty at this hour, just a few early risers going about their business. He should get his horse from the livery and ride out. That was the smart thing to do. Instead, he found himself walking into the small restaurant from yesterday, ordering coffee and breakfast, and taking the same table by the window. He told himself he was just hungry, that this had nothing to do with the woman sleeping upstairs. Half an hour later, Willa appeared in the doorway. She had changed out of the wedding dress into a simple green calico dress, and her dark hair was braided and pinned up. Without the desperation of yesterday, he could see she was genuinely beautiful. But there was still that haunted look in her eyes, that weariness that went bone deep. She spotted him and hesitated, then crossed to his table. "May I sit? It is your breakfast I ordered." He gestured to the plate across from him. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You were that certain I would come down, figured you had to eat sometime." He sipped his coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Poorly, but better than standing in the rain." She sat down and picked up her fork, pushing eggs around her plate. "I should thank you properly for last night. You had no reason to help me." "Did not need a reason. You needed help, I was there. Simple as that." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Kade noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, the way she kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst in. Finally, she set down her fork. "I need to go home today. Face my father and whatever comes next. But I wanted to see you first to say thank you and goodbye." "Where is home?" "About 3 miles outside town. Small farm. My father grows wheat mostly, some vegetables. It is not much, but it is all we have." She paused. Thomas was supposed to help expand it. He had plans for irrigation, for growing the operation. My father was counting on that. "So your marriage was a business arrangement," partially. "But I did care for Thomas, or I thought I did. Now I am not sure I knew him at all." "How do you plan a future with someone? Plan to share your life, and then just not show up? What kind of person does that?" "A coward," Kade said bluntly. "Or someone who got cold feet and handled it in the worst possible way. Either way, you are better off finding out now than after the wedding." "That is what my mind tells me. My heart is taking longer to catch up." She finally took a bite of her eggs. "What about you? You said you were just passing through. Are you still leaving today?" He should say yes. Should finish this meal, collect his horse, and ride out to the Triple Bar. Instead, he heard himself say, I was planning to look for work at one of the ranches around here. Figured I would stay through winter, see how it goes. You are a ranch hand. Mostly work with horses, breaking them, training them. I grew up on a ranch in Montana, worked cattle drives for a few years after my father died. I am decent at it. The Triple Bar is a good outfit. My father sells them hay sometimes. Jacob Morrison runs it. He is a fair man. She finished her eggs and picked up her coffee. If you are staying in the area, perhaps I will see you again. Perhaps. He wanted to offer to ride out with her to make sure she got home safely, but that felt like overstepping. She was not his concern. He had already done more than most strangers would. They finished breakfast and stepped out into the morning. The sky was a brilliant blue, washed clean by yesterday's rain. Puddles still dotted the street, reflecting the sky like scattered mirrors. Willa turned to him, and in the clear morning light, he could see the full extent of the vulnerability in her face. Thank you, Kade Quinlan, for everything. For not leaving me in the rain, for feeding me, for listening, for treating me like a person instead of a spectacle. You do not need to thank me. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Willa Lawrence. She nodded and walked away, her back straight despite everything. He watched until she turned the corner toward the livery, then headed in the opposite direction toward his own horse. Time to focus on his own life, his own problems. Time to let the woman in the ruined wedding dress become just a memory. But as he rode out toward the Triple Bar Ranch, he could not stop thinking about her eyes, and the way she had said she stopped believing in tomorrow. The Triple Bar Ranch sprawled across a valley 15 miles from Kennewick. Its main house, a solid timber structure that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Kade rode up the long drive, noting the well-maintained fences and the quality of the horses in the near pasture. This was a serious operation, not some struggling homestead. A man emerged from the barn as Kade dismounted. He was in his 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. Help you, looking for Jacob Morrison. Heard he might need hands. You heard right, I am Morrison. He looked Kade up and down with an experienced eye. You have experience, grew up on a ranch in Montana. Done cattle drives from Texas to Montana, mostly work with horses now. Breaking, training, general handling. Morrison's interest sharpened. You any good? Good enough that I am still alive and have all my fingers. A slight smile. Fair point. I have got a 3-year-old gelding that needs breaking. You break him without using a whip or spurs, job is yours. 8 months guaranteed, room and board plus 40 a month. Deal, Kade considered. It was decent pay and he liked Morrison's no-nonsense approach. Deal. The gelding was a beautiful bay with a white star on his forehead and a wild look in his eyes. Kade spent an hour just standing in the corral with him, letting the horse get used to his presence. Several ranch hands gathered to watch, leaning against the fence rails with the casual interest of men who had seen this done 100 times before. That Thomas Brennan's horse, one of them commented. He sold it to Morrison last week, said he was leaving town. Kade's hands stilled on the rope he was coiling. Thomas Brennan. Yeah, you know him. He was supposed to get married yesterday but never showed up. Left his bride standing at the altar and high-tailed it out of town with some saloon girl from Walla Walla. Can you believe that? The other hands murmured agreement, shaking their heads. Kade felt anger rise hot in his chest. So that was the story. Thomas had not just gotten cold feet. He had been planning his escape, selling off his assets, preparing to run away with another woman while Willa stood in the church waiting for him. He is a coward, Kade said flatly. That he is. Poor Willa Lawrence. She is a sweet girl, did not deserve that treatment. Her father is furious. Word is he rode out to Brennan's place this morning and trashed it pretty good. Cannot say I blame him. Kade turned his attention back to the horse, pushing thoughts of Willa away. He had his own life to focus on. Over the next 2 hours, he worked with the gelding patiently and firmly, earning its trust through consistent behavior and gentle handling. By the time the sun was high overhead, he had a saddle on the horse and was riding it around the corral at a trot. Morrison watched from the fence, his expression approving. When Kade finally dismounted, the rancher nodded. "You will do. Bunkhouse is behind the barn, supper is at 6, Sunday morning's off for church or whatever you want. No drinking during the week, and if you show up drunk on a workday, you are gone. Clear, clear. Good. Welcome to the Triple Bar." The bunkhouse was a long, low building with a dozen beds and a stove at one end. Most of the hands were out working, but a few sat around playing cards. They looked up as Kade entered, offering nods and brief introductions. He claimed an empty bed near the window, stowing his few belongings in the trunk at its foot. That night at supper, eaten in the ranch house kitchen with the other hands, Kade learned more about the area and its people. Morrison's wife, Catherine, was a warm woman who served generous portions and asked friendly questions. Their daughter, Emma, was married to a rancher in Oregon. Their son had died of fever 5 years ago, and the pain of that loss still showed in their eyes when they spoke of him. "You are from Montana?" Catherine asked, passing Kade the potatoes. "Originally. Been drifting the last couple years, working cattle drives mostly. What brought you to Kennewick? Heard there was work. Needed a place to winter." "Well, you picked a good spot. Jacob runs a fair operation, and the winters here are milder than Montana." The talk turned to ranch business, plans for the upcoming season, and the quality of this year's hay crop. No one mentioned Thomas Brennan or Willa Lawrence, and Kade was grateful. He wanted to forget about yesterday, to focus on the present and the work ahead. But that night, lying in his bunk listening to the snores of the other hands, he found himself wondering if Willa had made it home safely, if her father had been as angry as the hands suggested, if she was managing to find any peace after the humiliation and heartbreak. He told himself it was not his concern, told himself to stop thinking about her. It did not work. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Kade worked with the horses, proving his skill and earning the respect of the other hands. He found he liked the Triple Bar, liked Morrison's straightforward management and Catherine's motherly attention. He liked the work, the physical exhaustion that let him sleep without dreaming too much. A week after he started, Morrison asked him to ride into Kennewick to pick up supplies from the general store. Kade accepted the task, telling himself he was not hoping to catch a glimpse of Willa. Telling himself he was not disappointed when he did not see her on the main street or in any of the shops. He was loading the supplies onto the wagon when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Kade!" He turned to find Willa standing on the boardwalk, a basket over her arm. She looked better than the last time he had seen her. There was color in her cheeks and the haunted look had faded from her eyes, though shadows still lingered. "Willa." He tipped his hat. "How are you?" "Better. Some days more than others." She glanced at the supplies. "You are working at the Triple Bar, started last week, breaking horses mostly. Jacob Morrison is a good man to work for." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I never properly thanked you for that night. I was in a dark place and you pulled me out of it. That mattered more than you probably know. You would have been fine without me. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I am grateful." She shifted her basket to her other arm. "I heard about what Thomas did, that he left town with another woman, that he had been planning it for weeks." "I heard that too. I am sorry." "Do not be. You were right. Better to find out now than after the wedding. Still hurts, though, knowing I was that easy to discard, that he could plan our future while planning his escape. A man called Willa's name from down the street. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at Kade. "That is my father. I should go, but thank you again. For everything." She walked away before he could respond, joining a tall, stern-looking man with iron gray hair. The man looked at Kade with narrow eyes, assessing and dismissive. Then he took Willa's arm and steered her down the street without a backward glance. Kade finished loading the wagon, that brief encounter leaving him unsettled in a way he could not quite name. He told himself to let it go, to focus on his work and leave Willa Lawrence to her own life. But over the following weeks, he found himself looking for her whenever he went into town. Found himself asking casual questions about the Lawrence farm, learning that her father was struggling without the promised help from Thomas, that Willa was working harder than ever to keep things running. October turned into November. The days grew shorter and colder. Kade settled more fully into life at the Triple Bar, earning Morrison's trust and becoming friends with some of the other hands. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman in the wedding dress, standing in the rain, saying she had stopped believing in tomorrow. He was repairing a fence line near the road when he saw her again. She was driving a small wagon loaded with hay, handling the team with competent ease. She spotted him and pulled the horses to a stop. "Kade, I did not know the Triple Bar's land extended this far, northern boundary." He walked over to the wagon, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "That is a heavy load you are hauling. Delivery for the Morrison Ranch." "My father usually does it, but his back has been troubling him lately." She looked tired, he noticed. There were dark circles under her eyes and her hands on the reins showed signs of hard work. "I will follow you in, help you unload." "You do not have to do that, I know." He walked back to his horse. "But I am going to anyway." At the ranch, he helped her unload the hay into the barn. They worked in companionable silence, the physical labor creating its own kind of conversation. When the wagon was empty, Catherine Morrison appeared with fresh lemonade and cookies. "Willa, dear, how lovely to see you. How is your father managing, Mrs. Morrison? His back has been giving him trouble, but he is stubborn about resting." "Men usually are." Catherine glanced meaningfully at Kade. "Why do you not come inside for a few minutes?" "I have been meaning to talk to you about something." Willa followed Catherine into the house while Kade unhitched her team and led them to water. When Willa emerged 20 minutes later, she had a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mrs. Morrison offered me a job," she said as Kade helped her hitch the team back up. "Cooking and cleaning 3 days a week. She says her arthritis is getting worse and she needs help." "That is generous of her. It is needed income. With Thomas gone, we lost the expected help on the farm. My father is too proud to admit we are struggling, but we are. This job would help." She gathered the reins. "Strange how life works out. A month ago I thought I knew exactly what my future held. Now everything is different. You regret it?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Not marrying him, I mean, even though it happened the way it did." She considered this seriously. "I regret the humiliation. I regret trusting someone who did not deserve it, but marrying him, no, I think I would have been miserable. I just did not know it yet." Her eyes met his. "Thank you, again." "Seems like I am always thanking you." "You do not need to keep thanking me for basic human decency." A real smile this time, small but genuine. "Maybe I should have higher standards than basic human decency." "Maybe you should." She drove away and Kade watched until the wagon disappeared around the bend. Behind him, Catherine Morrison chuckled softly. "That girl has had a hard time of it." Kade turned to find her standing in the barn doorway. "Yes, madam. Thomas Brennan was a fool. Willa is worth 10 of him." "I do not disagree." Catherine gave him a knowing look. "She will be here Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, starting next week, just so you know." "Why would I need to know that?" Oh, no reason. But her smile suggested she saw far more than he was comfortable with. That night, lying in his bunk, Kade admitted to himself what he had been avoiding for weeks. He was interested in Willa Lawrence. More than interested. He looked forward to the rare times he saw her, thought about her more than was reasonable for someone he barely knew. But she was recovering from a devastating betrayal. The last thing she needed was another man complicating her life, so he would keep his distance. Be friendly but not forward. Let her heal without adding pressure or expectation. It was the right thing to do. Tuesday morning, he made sure he was working near the house when Willa arrived. He told himself it was coincidence. Catherine greeted her warmly, and soon the smell of fresh bread filled the air. At noon, when Catherine called the hands in for lunch, Willa served the meal with quiet efficiency. "Best biscuits I have had in years," one of the older hands declared. Willa blushed at the praise. "My mother's recipe." Kade caught her eye across the table and saw something new there. Not the despair of that rainy day, not the weariness of recent weeks, but something lighter. Something that might have been contentment, or at least the beginning of it. The pattern continued. Willa came 3 days a week, cooking and cleaning and slowly becoming part of the ranch's rhythm. Kade found excuses to be nearby, to exchange brief words or shared smiles. He learned small things about her. That she hummed while she worked, old hymns mostly. That she was left-handed. That she took her coffee with lots of cream and just a little sugar. That her laugh, when it finally emerged from under the layers of hurt, was warm and genuine and made something in his chest tighten. He was in trouble. He knew it. But he could not seem to stop himself. December brought the first real snow. Kade was in the barn, working with a young mare when Catherine found him. "I need a favor," she said. "Willa's wagon wheel broke on her way in this morning. Jacob already took the hands out to the far pasture for the day. Could you fix it and then drive her home when she is done? Our wagon is in the shop getting repaired, or I would lend her that, of course." He spent an hour fixing the wheel, taking more care than strictly necessary to ensure it was solid. When he finished, he found Willa in the kitchen, putting away the last of the clean dishes. "I heard about your wheel. I fixed it, but it is getting dark and starting to snow harder. I should drive you home, make sure you get there safely." She looked ready to protest, then glanced at the window where snow was indeed falling more heavily. "I suppose that would be practical. Thank you." They drove through the growing storm in silence at first. The world was turning white around them, the road barely visible. Kade kept the horses at a steady pace, watchful for any problems. "I have been meaning to ask you something," Willa finally said. "That day in the rain when you first spoke to me, why did you stop? Most people just stared. Some looked away, but you actually stopped and helped. Why?" He considered his answer carefully. "I told you about my brother. What I did not tell you was how I felt after he died. Like nothing mattered anymore. Like the future was just empty space stretching out forever. I stopped caring about tomorrow too, and I know how dangerous that feeling is." "Did you get past it, that feeling, eventually?" "Took time and work and making myself believe that James would have wanted me to keep living, to not waste the life I still had." He glanced at her. "You reminded me of myself in that moment, and I guess I wanted to help you avoid some of the mistakes I made." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind where you push everyone away and convince yourself you are better off alone, where you stop trying because trying means risking more pain." He turned his attention back to the road. "I spent a year like that, drinking too much, drifting from place to place, not letting anyone close. It is a lonely way to live, but you changed." "I did. Woke up one morning with a terrible headache and a worse emptiness. Realized James would have been ashamed of what I had become. Decided to try being the man he thought I was instead of the mess I had become." He paused, not saying it was easy, but it was necessary. They rode in silence for a while longer. Then Willa said quietly, "I think I understand. After Thomas left, I wanted to disappear, to never trust anyone again, to lock myself away where no one could hurt me. But that is just another kind of death, is it not?" "It is. You helped me see that. That night in the restaurant when you told me tomorrow comes whether we believe in it or not. That has stayed with me. When things get hard, I remember that. Remember that I have a choice in how I respond." The Lawrence farm appeared through the snow, a small house and barn barely visible in the growing darkness. Kade pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Willa down. She stood there in the snow, looking up at him. "Would you like to come in? Warm up before you head back." "My father should be in the barn, so it would be proper. He should say no, should maintain that careful distance." Instead, he heard himself say, "That would be nice." The house was small but tidy, with a warm stove and simple furniture. Willa busied herself making coffee while Kade stood awkwardly by the door. When she handed him a cup, their fingers brushed and he felt that small touch all the way through him. "I never asked," she said, settling into a chair across from him. "Why were you riding through Kennewick that day?" "Where were you coming from?" "Wyoming. I had been working a ranch there but decided it was time to move on. Heard about work in Washington Territory and pointed my horse west." "Do you like it here?" "I do. Morrison is a good boss. The work is satisfying. The other hands are decent company." He met her eyes. "And the scenery has grown on me." She blushed, understanding his meaning. "Kade, I know, too soon, too complicated. You do not need me saying things like that." He set down his cup and stood. "I should go before the snow gets worse." But she stood too, crossing to him quickly. "Wait, it is not too soon. Or maybe it is, but I do not care. I need you to know something." She took a breath. "You saved me that day, not just from the rain, but from drowning in despair. And over these past weeks, seeing you at the ranch, talking to you, I have felt something I did not think I would feel again. Hope, interest in tomorrow, maybe even happiness." His heart was pounding. "Willa, I am not asking for anything. I know I am still figuring myself out after Thomas. But I wanted you to know that you matter, that you have mattered since that first day." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. When she did not move, he cupped her face gently in his hands. "You matter too. More than you probably should for someone I have known such a short time. Then maybe we should see where this goes, carefully, slowly, but honestly. I would like that." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and for a moment, the whole world was just the two of them in the warmth of that small house while snow fell outside. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I really do need to go," he said reluctantly. "But I will see you Thursday." Thursday. He drove back to the ranch through the snow with a lighter heart than he had carried in years. Behind him, he knew Willa was watching from the window, and ahead of him, he knew tomorrow waited with all its possibilities. The next months passed in a dance of careful courtship. Kade and Willa stole moments together whenever they could. Brief conversations in the Morrison kitchen. Walks around the ranch yard when her work was done. Occasional dinners at the Lawrence farm where Willa's father watched Kade with suspicious eyes but gradually warmed to him. "You are good with horses," Oliver Lawrence finally admitted one Sunday in late January. "Willa says Morrison speaks highly of you." "I try to earn my pay, sir." "And my daughter, are you trying to earn her too?" Kade met the older man's eyes directly. "I am trying to deserve her, not sure I ever will, but I am trying." Oliver studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That is an honest answer. I appreciate that." Thomas was all smooth words and empty promises. "I prefer honest trying." It felt like a blessing, or close enough to one. Winter loosened its grip and spring crept in. Kade helped Oliver repair fences and plan the season's planting. He spent his Sundays at the Lawrence farm and the rest of his week working for Morrison and counting the hours until he could see Willa again. "You are in deep," one of the ranch hands teased him one evening. "Never seen a man fall so hard. Is it that obvious? Only to everyone with eyes." Kade did not deny it. He was in deep. Somewhere between that rainy October day and these bright April mornings, Willa had become essential to him. He loved her strength, the way she had rebuilt herself after devastation. He loved her quiet humor and her fierce loyalty. He loved the way she looked at him like he was something precious and surprising. One Sunday in May, as they walked along the creek that bordered her father's land, he took her hand and stopped. "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, a question in her eyes. "I love you." The words came easier than he expected. "I have loved you for months now, but I wanted to give you time, to make sure you were ready, but I cannot wait any more to say it. I love you, Willa Lawrence. You are the tomorrow I stopped looking for and found anyway." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I have since that first day when you stood in the rain and refused to let me drown in despair. You gave me back my belief in tomorrow, and then you gave me a reason to want it." He kissed her there by the creek with the spring sun warm on their faces and the sound of water over stones providing music. When they finally walked back to the house, hand in hand, Oliver took one look at their faces and nodded. About time. That evening, Kade asked for permission to court Willa officially. Oliver gave it without hesitation. They celebrated with coffee and the apple pie Willa had made that morning, and Kade felt a contentment he had not known since before his brother died. He had found a home, a family, a future. But he wanted to do this right, wanted to have something to offer Willa besides just his wages and his affection. So the next day he sought out Morrison. "I want to buy land," he told the rancher. "Start my own horse breeding operation. I have some money saved, but not enough yet. I was wondering if you might know of any opportunities." Morrison leaned back in his chair, considering. "There is a parcel about 5 miles from here, good grazing land with a creek running through it. Owner died last year and his widow wants to sell. She would probably take payments if the buyer was reliable. Could you introduce me?" "I could, but I have a better idea." Morrison pulled out a ledger. "I have been thinking about expanding my breeding program. I need someone who knows horses the way you do. What if we formed a partnership? I provide the land and initial stock. You provide the expertise and management. We split the profits 60-40. My favor the first 3 years to cover my investment, then 50-50 after that." Kade stared at him. "That is incredibly generous. It is good business. You are the best horseman I have had in 20 years. I would be a fool to let you leave when we could both profit from working together." Morrison extended his hand. "What do you say?" "I say yes, and thank you." They shook on it, and Kade left the office feeling like his life was finally falling into place. That night, he wrote to his mother in Montana, telling her about Willa and the partnership and how he had finally found where he belonged. The partnership with Morrison moved forward quickly. By June, they had purchased the land and started construction on a small house and stable. Kade spent every spare hour working on the buildings, and on Sundays, Willa would join him, helping paint and make plans for the interior. "I was thinking," she said one afternoon as they took a break in the shade, "if we put the kitchen on the south side, we will get good light in the mornings." He smiled at her. She blushed. "I mean if you wanted someday." He pulled her close. "I want not someday, soon. Willa, I want to marry you. I want this house to be our house. I want to build a life together and fill these rooms with love and laughter and maybe, if we are blessed, children someday. Are you asking me to marry you? I am. I do not have a ring yet, but I have a house under construction and a partnership and every bit of my heart. Will you marry me? Yes. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, Kade Quinlan, I will marry you. They set the wedding for late August after the house was finished and the harvest was in. Willa insisted on a small ceremony with just family and close friends. No big production like the first time, just honest vows and genuine love. I want it to be real, she told him. Not a show for the town. Just us, promising forever to each other. That sounds perfect to me. The summer passed in a blur of work and planning and stolen moments of happiness. The house took shape, solid and welcoming. Willa sewed curtains and quilts. Kade built furniture in the evenings, simple but sturdy pieces that would last. Oliver softened further, admitting to Kade one day that he was glad Willa had found a good man. I was wrong about Thomas, he said. Thought he was solid and reliable. Turns out he was neither. But you have proved yourself through action, not words. That matters. I will spend my life proving worthy of her, Kade promised. I believe you will. August 23rd dawned clear and warm. The wedding took place in the Morrisons' parlor with just a dozen people present. Willa wore a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. Kade wore his best suit, nervous and eager in equal measure. The minister kept the ceremony brief and meaningful. When it came time for vows, Kade took Willa's hands and spoke from his heart. I promise to love you every day in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. I promise to choose us, no matter what challenges come. I promise to build tomorrows with you, one after another, for as long as we are given. Willa's voice was steady despite her tears. I promise to trust you with my heart, even though it was once broken. I promise to stand with you in rain and shine, in sorrow and joy. I promise to believe in our tomorrows, because you taught me that hope is not foolish but necessary. I love you, Kade, and I promise to show you that love every day for the rest of our lives. When the minister pronounced them married, Kade kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion he had been holding back. The small gathering erupted in applause and laughter. Catherine Morrison cried happy tears. Oliver shook Kade's hand with genuine warmth. And Willa, beautiful Willa, smiled up at him like he had hung the moon. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Catherine had prepared a feast. There was music and dancing in the Morrisons' yard as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson. Kade held Willa close as they swayed to the fiddle music, both of them grinning like fools. Happy, he asked, impossibly so. You, more than I have been in years, maybe more than I have ever been. As darkness fell, they said their goodbyes and rode together to their new house. It looked beautiful in the moonlight, windows glowing with lamplight. Kade had spent the previous day making sure everything was perfect. Fresh flowers in a vase on the table, clean sheets on the bed. Wood stacked by the stove, he carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing. Once inside, he set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. This is our beginning, he said, our real beginning. I know, she kissed him softly. I am not afraid anymore, Kade. Of tomorrow, of the future, of opening my heart. You made me brave again. You did that yourself. I just stood with you while you found your way back. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, learning each other in the quiet privacy of their new home. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Willa traced patterns on Kade's chest. You ever think about that day, the rain, the church? Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago now. I think about it often, about how close I came to missing all of this. If you had not stopped that day, if you had just ridden past like everyone else, Where would I be now? You would have found your way. You are stronger than you think. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to do it alone. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Thank you for choosing me, for stopping that day, for every day since. I would choose you 1,000 times over, in the rain or the sun. Yesterday, today, and every tomorrow we get. They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss. Later, as Willa slept in his arms, Kade lay awake, marveling at the strange paths that led people to each other. He had ridden into Kennewick looking for nothing more than work and shelter. Instead, he had found love and purpose and a future bright with possibility. The seasons turned. Fall brought harvest and the hard work of establishing their breeding program. Kade proved his eye for horses, selecting quality stock and training them with patience and skill. The operation grew slowly but steadily, earning a reputation for excellence. Morrison was pleased with the partnership, often telling anyone who would listen that bringing Kade on was the best business decision he had made. Winter settled in, and Kade and Willa learned the rhythms of married life. They worked side by side during the day and held each other through the long nights. They argued occasionally, usually about small things, and learned how to fight fair and forgive quickly. They laughed often. They made plans and dreams and adjustments when reality did not match expectations. Oliver sold his farm in December and moved into a small house in Kennewick. His back had gotten worse, and he could not manage the land alone anymore. The money from the sale gave him security for his remaining years, and he seemed relieved to let go of the burden. He visited Kade and Willa often, clearly happy to see his daughter so content. "You did good," he told Kade one Sunday afternoon. "She is happy, truly happy. That is all a father can want." Spring of 1884 brought unexpected news. Willa suspected she might be pregnant but waited to be sure before telling Kade. When she finally confirmed it with the doctor in Kennewick, she planned an elaborate surprise, cooking his favorite meal and presenting him with baby booties she had knitted. Kade stared at the tiny booties, understanding dawning. "Are you telling me what I think you are telling me? We are going to have a baby. In October." He let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses, then swept her into his arms, spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "Are you sure? Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working so hard?" She laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am fine. Pregnant women have been doing things for centuries. But yes, I am sure, and yes, I am happy. Are you?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He kissed her soundly. "We are going to be parents." The months of Willa's pregnancy were some of the happiest of Kade's life. He watched in awe as her body changed, as their baby grew. He talked to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about horses and Montana and how lucky they were to have Willa as their mother. He built a cradle from oak, carving delicate patterns into the wood. He prepared the small room off their bedroom as a nursery, painting it soft yellow because they did not know if they were having a boy or a girl. Willa bloomed with pregnancy. She tired more easily but seemed to glow with an inner light. Catherine Morrison clucked over her like a mother hen, making sure she rested enough and ate well. Oliver visited more frequently, excited about becoming a grandfather. As October approached, Kade found himself getting nervous. He had helped birth countless foals and calves, but the thought of Willa going through labor terrified him. She laughed at his worry but also found it touching. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I will be fine. I know. But I am allowed to worry about you." "You are, but not too much. We need you strong and steady when the time comes." The time came on an October night during a rainstorm. Kade rode through the downpour to fetch the midwife, then spent the next 12 hours pacing and praying while Willa labored in their bedroom. Catherine stayed with her, offering comfort and expertise. Oliver waited downstairs with Kade, both men wearing grooves in the floor with their pacing. When the baby finally arrived just before dawn, it was a boy. The midwife emerged to tell them mother and baby were both healthy, and Kade took the stairs 3 at a time to reach them. Willa was propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as Kade entered, and her smile could have lit the entire territory. "Come meet your son." Kade crossed to the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the impossibly small person in Willa's arms. His son. Their son. The baby had dark hair and a scrunched-up face and tiny perfect fingers that waved in the air. "He is beautiful," Kade whispered, afraid his voice might break. "You are amazing. I cannot believe you did this. We did this." Willa shifted the baby so Kade could see him better. "Do you want to hold him?" Kade sat carefully on the edge of the bed and accepted the precious bundle. The baby weighed almost nothing but felt like the entire world in his arms. A surge of protective love so fierce it was almost painful washed through him. "Hey there, little one. I am your father. And that is your mother, the strongest, bravest, most wonderful woman you will ever know. You are one lucky boy." The baby opened his eyes, dark blue and unfocused, and seemed to look right at Kade. Something clicked into place, some fundamental understanding that his life had just been divided into before and after this moment. "What should we name him?" Willa asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, holding his son in the dim morning light with rain still drumming on the roof, Kade knew, "James, after my brother. If that is all right with you." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. James Quinlan. Welcome to the world, little James." Oliver and Catherine came up to meet the baby, both of them emotional and delighted. Catherine declared him the most beautiful baby she had ever seen, though Kade suspected she said that about all babies. Oliver held his grandson with surprising gentleness for such a stern man. "He has your nose," he told Willa. "Poor kid." "He has Willa's nose," Kade corrected. "Lucky kid." As the morning progressed, Kade sat by the bed watching Willa nurse James, marveling at how natural she looked, how right this all felt. 1.5 years ago, she had been standing in the rain in a ruined wedding dress, convinced she had no tomorrow. Now she was here in their home with their son, building a future neither of them could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Willa asked, catching him staring. "That life is strange and surprising and sometimes incredibly kind. That I rode into Kennewick looking for work and found everything I did not know I needed." He reached over to touch James's soft head. "That I am the luckiest man alive. We are both lucky. We found each other when we needed it most." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he still needed feeding every few hours and seemed to prefer nights for his most wakeful periods. Kade and Willa stumbled through those early days in a haze of sleeplessness and joy, learning on the job how to be parents. Catherine proved invaluable, stopping by regularly with food and advice. Oliver visited weekly, clearly smitten with his grandson. The ranch hands congratulated Kade with hearty handshakes and knowing smiles. Morrison gave him a week off work, insisting he needed time with his family. As winter settled in again, their life found a new rhythm. Kade worked the ranch and the breeding program during the day while Willa managed the house and baby. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, James sleeping in his cradle nearby, and talk about their days. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, content in each other's presence. "I never imagined this," Willa said one evening in December. "When I was standing in that rain, I thought my life was over, that all my chances for happiness were gone. I could not have been more wrong. You just had to find the right person to weather the storm with. I did. I found you." James grew and changed daily. He learned to smile, to track faces with his eyes, to grab at anything within reach. Kade was completely enchanted, spending every free moment with his son. He would tell James stories while he worked around the property, carrying the baby in a sling Willa had sewn. He would sing to him, off-key but enthusiastic, making up songs about horses and Montana and the mother they both adored. "You are going to spoil him," Willa teased. "Impossible. He is too perfect to spoil. Every parent thinks that. Wait until he is 2 and throwing tantrums." But Kade could not imagine anything dimming his love for this tiny person. James was proof that good things could come from dark times, that hope was not foolish but powerful, that tomorrow could be better than today. Spring came again, bringing new foals in the breeding program and new confidence in their growing family. James was 6 months old, sitting up and babbling and generally delighting everyone who met him. The ranch was doing well. Oliver's health had stabilized. Willa had returned to helping Catherine at the Morrison place a few days a week, bringing James along and letting him nap in a basket while she worked. One Sunday in May, they drove out to the creek where Kade had first told Willa he loved her. They spread a blanket on the grass and spent the afternoon watching James try to grab at the wildflowers while they reminisced about the past 2 years. "You ever think about Thomas?" Kade asked. It was something he had wondered but never felt comfortable bringing up. Willa considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, not often. Mostly I am grateful to him for being a coward. If he had shown up that day, if we had gotten married, I would never have found this. Found you, found real love." She picked a dandelion and twirled it between her fingers. "I thought I loved him, but I did not understand what love really was. What I felt for Thomas was pale and shallow compared to what I feel for you. I am glad he was a coward too then, though I wish you had not had to go through that pain to get here. The pain made me appreciate this more. Made me understand how rare and precious it is to find someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway." She leaned over to kiss him. "You do that. You see all of me, the broken and healed parts, and you love me through it all. That is easy. You are worth loving." James chose that moment to cry, wanting attention. Kade scooped him up and tossed him gently in the air, earning delighted giggles. Willa watched them with a soft smile, and Kade felt a wave of contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was his life. These were his people. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it, all those months of drifting after James died. He had needed to lose everything to find what mattered. He had needed to ride through that rain to find the woman who would become his everything. The years that followed were full and good. The horse breeding operation expanded and thrived. Morrison eventually made Kade a full partner in the Triple Bar itself, recognizing his contributions and loyalty. They bought more land, hired more hands, and became one of the most respected ranches in the territory. James grew into a lively, curious toddler with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn streak. He loved the horses and wanted to be in the barn constantly, following Kade around and asking endless questions in his broken toddler speech. When James was 2.5, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news felt different, less scary and more joyful. They knew what to expect, had confidence in their ability to handle another child. The pregnancy was easier too. Perhaps because Willa was not working as hard, or perhaps because second pregnancies often were. Their daughter arrived in early spring of 1887, during a gentle rain that reminded them both of that first day. She was smaller than James had been, with a cap of red blonde hair that surprised them both. "Where did that come from?" Willa asked, looking at the baby's hair. "My mother had red hair when she was young," Kade said. "I had forgotten that." They named her Rose Catherine, after Cade's grandmother and the woman who had been like a mother to Willa. Catherine Morrison cried when they told her, honored and touched. James was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. Kade and Willa taught him to be gentle, to understand that babies were fragile. He took his role as big brother seriously, bringing Rose his favorite toys and singing to her the songs Kade had sung to him. Life fell into new patterns. The house they had built for two now held four, and every room echoed with life and love. Mornings were chaotic with feeding and dressing and getting everyone ready for the day. Evenings were calmer, with family dinners and stories and tucking small bodies into bed. Nights belonged to Kade and Willa, stolen hours to remember they were not just parents but partners, lovers, best friends. Oliver passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1888. He had been declining for months, his body finally giving out. But he died happy, having spent his last years watching his daughter thrive and his grandchildren grow. They buried him in the Kennewick cemetery on a cold February day, and Willa grieved but also celebrated a life well lived and a father who had loved her even when he did not always show it perfectly. "He was proud of you," Kade told her as they stood by the grave after everyone else had left. "He told me once that watching you rebuild your life after Thomas was one of his greatest joys. He said you were stronger than he had ever given you credit for." I wish he had told me that. He did, in his way, by visiting every week, by holding his grandchildren with such tenderness, by accepting me into the family. You are right. And I am grateful I had those years with him, that he got to know James and Rose, that he saw me happy. They walked back to the wagon where Catherine was watching the children. Life went on as it always did. The grief would fade, but the love would remain, woven into the fabric of their days. More years passed. Washington became a state in 1889, and Kennewick grew from a small frontier town into a thriving community. The railroad reached them, bringing new opportunities and connections to the wider world. Kade and Willa's ranch prospered, their horses sought after throughout the region. They hired on more staff, expanded the stables, and built a larger barn. James grew into a serious boy who loved books as much as horses. Rose was wild and fearless, climbing trees and racing her brother and generally keeping everyone on their toes. In 1890, Willa discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. She gave birth to twin boys that autumn, and suddenly their house felt very full indeed. 4 children, Kade said one evening as they surveyed the chaos of the dinner table. "We have 4 children. We do." Willa laughed as one of the twins threw food at his brother. "Are you regretting stopping for me in that rain?" "Not for a single second, though I might regret not building a bigger house." They added on 2 more rooms the following year, giving the children more space and themselves a little peace. Catherine Morrison passed away in 1892, her arthritis finally claiming her after years of pain. Morrison took it hard, aging seemingly overnight. Kade spent more time at the main ranch house, supporting the man who had given him so much. When Morrison died 18 months later, he left the triple bar to Kade, saying in his will that no one had earned it more. Kade was overwhelmed by the inheritance and the trust it represented. He ran the ranch with the same integrity and skill Morrison had, honoring the man's memory through his work. He hired a good foreman to manage the day-to-day operations, letting himself focus more on the breeding program and his family. The children grew. James went to college in Seattle, studying veterinary medicine. Rose shocked everyone by deciding she wanted to be a doctor, rare for a woman, but she had the determination and intelligence to manage it. The twins were still young, but already showing distinct personalities. One loved working with the horses like his father. The other was fascinated by engineering and mechanics, spending hours taking things apart and putting them back together. Kade and Willa aged gracefully, their hair graying but their love deepening with each passing year. They still stole moments alone, riding out to the creek or sitting on their porch in the evenings watching the sunset. After nearly 2 decades together, they could communicate with a look, finish each other's sentences, and still surprise each other with small gestures of love. "Do you ever think about that day?" Kade asked one evening in the autumn of 1900. They were sitting on the porch, watching the leaves turn gold and red. The rain, the church, all of it, often. "It is strange to think how different my life could have been if you had not stopped. If I had married Thomas, if I had given in to that despair. But you did not. You fought your way back, with your help." She took his hand, fingers interlacing automatically. "You gave me something to fight for, a reason to believe in tomorrow again. You gave me the same thing. After James died, I was drifting, going through the motions but not really living. You reminded me what it felt like to care, to hope, to love." He brought her hand to his lips. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. Then we saved each other. What a good team we make." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside, they could hear the sounds of their children, home for the weekend. Laughter and arguments and the general chaos of a full house. It was exactly the kind of tomorrow neither of them had believed in that rainy October day 18 years ago. James and Rose both graduated, James becoming a successful veterinarian in Spokane, and Rose defying expectations by earning her medical degree and opening a practice in Portland. The twins grew into strong young men, one taking over the day-to-day ranch operations, and the other starting a business designing and building irrigation systems for farms throughout the region. Kade and Willa became grandparents when James married and had 3 children in quick succession. Rose followed suit a few years later, her husband a lawyer who supported her career even when society disapproved. The twins married as well, bringing new daughters-in-law to the family gatherings that happened every few months. As the new century progressed, Kade and Willa slowly stepped back from the active management of the ranch. They had raised their children, built a successful business, and earned the right to rest. They traveled some, visiting their children and grandchildren. They spent long hours on their porch, watching the world change around them while their love remained constant. On a rainy afternoon in October 1920, exactly 38 years after they first met, Kade and Willa stood together in the same spot where he had found her in her ruined wedding dress. The church was still there, though much expanded. The town had grown around them, but this spot remained unchanged. "I was so lost that day," Willa said softly, rain beginning to fall around them, "so certain my life was over. And instead it was just beginning." Kade pulled her close, sheltering her from the rain with his body like he had all those years ago. "We were both lost. We just needed to find each other. I stopped believing in tomorrow," she quoted herself from that long-ago day, "and I convinced you to start again. You did more than that. You gave me 1,000 tomorrows, each one better than the last. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. We gave that to each other, Willa. We built it together, one day at a time." They stood there in the rain, 2 people in their 60s whose love had weathered decades and emerged stronger. Around them, the town bustled with activity. Cars drove past where horses had once stood, Electric lights glowed in the windows. The world had changed almost beyond recognition since that October day in 1882. But some things remained constant. Love, commitment, the choice to believe in tomorrow even when today was dark, the courage to stand in the rain and let someone help you. "Let's go home," Willa said finally. "Our children are coming for dinner and I need to start cooking." "Our home," Kade corrected gently. "Built on the foundation of a woman brave enough to keep breathing even when she wanted to give up, and a man lucky enough to stop and offer help." They walked back to their car, hand in hand, still partners in everything after all these years. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, but neither of them minded. Rain had brought them together. It seemed fitting that it marked their anniversaries, their memories, their story. That evening, their house filled with family. Children and grandchildren, spouses and partners, laughter and love spilling from every room. Kade stood at the head of the long dining table he had built decades ago and looked around at the faces gathered there. His legacy. Their legacy. All of it born from a moment of compassion on a rainy day. "What are you thinking about?" Willa asked from beside him. "Everything. Nothing. How one small choice can change the entire trajectory of a life." He squeezed her hand. "How grateful I am that I made the right choice that day." "Me too." They sat down to dinner, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life. The conversation was loud and joyful, arguments about politics mixing with gentle teasing and family jokes. James told stories about his practice. Rose debated medical ethics with one of the grandchildren. The twins good-naturedly competed over whose irrigation system was superior. And through it all, Kade and Willa sat together, sometimes joining the conversation but often just observing, secure in the knowledge of what they had built together. A family. A legacy. A love story that had started in rain and despair but bloomed into decades of joy. Late that night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, they prepared for bed. Willa sat at her vanity brushing out her gray hair while Kade changed into his nightclothes. They had done this same routine thousands of times, comfortable and familiar. "Thank you," Willa said suddenly. "For what?" "For stopping that day. For seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. For loving me through the healing and the growing and all the years since." She turned to face him. "For giving me a life I never could have imagined." Kade crossed to her and knelt down, taking her hands. His knees protested the position, but he ignored them. Some moments deserved grand gestures regardless of age. "I am the one who should be thanking you. You took a broken, drifting man and gave him purpose. You loved me when I was still learning to love myself again. You built this life with me, one day at a time, one choice at a time." He kissed her hands. "You are the tomorrow I stopped looking for and found anyway. The tomorrow that made every yesterday worthwhile." She cupped his face in her hands, looking at him with eyes that had seen decades but still held wonder. "We found each other right when we needed to. That is grace, I think, or luck, or fate. Whatever it was, I am grateful. So am I." They held each other there in their bedroom, the room where they had loved and laughed and raised their children. Outside, rain continued to fall, drumming on the roof with the same rhythm it had 38 years ago. But inside, there was only warmth and love and the quiet joy of two people who had chosen each other again and again and again. Eventually, they climbed into bed, fitting together like they had every night for decades. Kade wrapped his arms around Willa, feeling her breathe, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "My tomorrow, my always." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for standing in the rain with me, for all the years since." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the life they had built. Outside, the rain continued, washing the world clean, promising new tomorrows. And inside, two hearts beat in sync, still believing in those tomorrows after all these years, still grateful for that rainy October day when a cowboy chose the bride who stood in the rain and convinced her that tomorrow was worth believing in after all.